In 1066, the history of the British Isles was forever changed. Under its new Norman French overlords, the Kingdom of England would seek to accomplish what the Anglo-Saxon kings never had, the total conquest of the Celtic Britons. However, while it took William the Conqueror only a few years to consolidate his rule over all England, his successors would need over 200 years to bring the Princes of Cymru to heel. In this third episode on the history of medieval Wales, we will discuss the first wave of Norman invasions into the land of Cadwaladr's dragon, and explore how the Cymru contended with their most fearsome foreign invader to date. You too were invaded long ago by bundles of keys and sandwiches of plastic and leather, who demand to be transported around in your clothing and luggage with a truly medieval entitlement. Throw off the yoke of your day-to-day oppressors with upgrades from our sponsor, Ridge. First, there's the Ridge wallet. It fits everything you'll need with less material and weight to shove in your pockets. We tested it out and it's smaller than even the smallest wallet we could find. And it's not because it's shoddy. The compactness comes from its military-grade build, and hence it comes with a lifetime guarantee. There's space for 12 cards, and there's a band and clip system if you want to attach cash to the side as well. Choose your favourite of the many designs available, then enjoy a modernised wallet solution. Usually you'll be encumbered by keys as well, so to fix this, use the Ridge key case. This sleek little gadget holds 6 keys in an organised fashion. No more messy clumps of key rings that tangle with each other or your clothes, and it looks more professional too. The lifetime guarantee covers the key case as well, and Ridge offers a 99-day money-back guarantee on their products if you somehow don't prefer them to your old setup. Check out Ridge's selection by using our link in the description, and use the coupon code KINGSANDGENERALS to get 10% off the liberation of your pocket space. In the year 1039, 27 years before the coming of the Normans, a man named Gruffydd ap Llywelyn assumed the kingship of Gwynedd. In the first 5 years of his reign, he managed to crush the Earl Leofric of Mercia's armies at Welshpool, subjugated the kingdom of Deheubarth, and defeated a fleet of Viking marauders at the Bay of Pwllhrfach. Gruffydd's relationship with the various Gaelicized Vikings on the Irish Sea was fluid, for in 1052 he allied with a large Hiberno-Norse fleet and raided the English border county of Herefordshire. Gruffydd of Gwynedd was able to get away with his brazen aggressions on English territory by playing the powerful lords of England off one another, raiding some, but forging important alliances with others, such as Elfgar, the Lord of Mercia. With the help of Elfgar, he brutally subdued regions in Deheubarth and conquered Morgannwg. In doing so, the King of Gwynedd united all of Wales, the first monarch to ever do so. However, this grand unification would prove ephemeral. When Gruffydd's ally, the Lord of Mercia, died in 1062, Gruffydd was left in a vulnerable position. That same year, a certain Harold Godwinson, Earl of East Anglia and Hereford, launched a huge offensive into Wales, overrunning the country. A year later, Gruffydd's household, likely bribed by Harold, turned on their king, killing him. Had Gruffydd ap Llywelyn reigned for longer, then perhaps Wales would have crystallised into a more permanent state of unification, much like England and Scotland had in the previous century. However, this was not to be, and his death instead heralded a return to form, with Wales splitting along its traditional boundaries once more. Cruising on the glories of his successes in Wales, Harold Godwinson was chosen by the Saxon Witenagemot to be King of England after the death of his half-brother Edward the Confessor. This reign would not last out the year, for in October of 1066, the Saxon warrior ruler was slain in battle by rival claimant to the throne, William, Duke of Normandy. Thus, centuries of Anglo-Saxon rule in England were brought to an end. Thereafter, the most powerful kingdom in the British Isles would be dominated by the Normans, a French-speaking aristocracy. Shortly after his ascension, William the Conqueror, now William I of England, established new earldoms in Hereford, Shrewsbury and Chester, and appointed them to hardened Norman knights who he entrusted with guarding the Welsh border. At the time, Wales was divided principally between Gwynedd, Powys, Deheubarth and Morgannwg. During William's reign, the border was relatively stable, and several Welsh kings, like Rhys ap Tudur of Deheubarth, entered into tributary relationships with the Anglo-Norman king. This, however, did not stop some ambitious Norman adventurers from thundering into Wales anyways. In 1072, the intrepid knight-errant Robert of Rhuddlan seized the easternmost portion of Gwynedd and erected a castle there, establishing himself as a local overlord. In general, Norman knights were a notoriously bellicose lot, and Wales represented a fresh new frontier of land and wealth. From 1088 onwards, the Lord of Herefordshire, Bernard de Neufmarché, began ingressing into the territory of Brycheiniog. This provoked a fierce retaliation from King Rhys ap Tudor, but he was slain by Neufmarché's mounted knights in a battle at Aberhonthie in 1093. Rhys's death meant that Deheubarth was now vulnerable, and sure enough, the Lord of Shrewsbury soon overran it. Meanwhile, Robert of Rhuddlan had long since seized control of all of Gwynedd. In just a few years of ingress, the Marcher Lords seemed posed to conquer all of Wales. The Cymry, however, would soon make the Normans pay bitterly for their trespasses. Back in 1055, a child of princely stock was born. Gruffydd ap Cynan was a descendant of Rhodri Mawr, but was also an exile, having been born across the sea from his ancestral homeland in the Norse Gaelic town of Dublin. After an initial failed attempt in 1075, Gruffydd managed to seize the throne of Gwynedd in 1081. However, he would not enjoy his crown for long, for soon after, Robert of Rhuddlan conspired with several other Norman Marcher lords to lure the new King of Gwynedd into a diplomatic meeting, only to treacherously imprison him. Thereafter, Robert of Rhuddlan became the foreign overlord of all of Gwynedd, building Norman-style Motte and Bailey castles throughout the region, all while the rest of Wales was being overrun by other Norman Marcher lords. If the traditional account is to be believed, then in 1093, after a decade of captivity, Cynan escaped his Norman captors and on July 3rd of that year killed Robert of Rhuddlan in a skirmish on the limestone shores of the Great Orme. After this, Hugh Le Gros de Vroche, Earl of Chester, became Gwyned's new foreign overlord. That same year, the fire of rebellion erupted all across the land of the Cymry. In southern Wales, King Cadogan ap Blethyn of Powys spearheaded a lightning campaign that saw his warband tear through Deheubarth unopposed. Simultaneously, the Britons of Gwynedd erupted in open revolt, allowing Gruffydd ap Cynan to throw Hugh of Chester out on his rump, and for the third time reclaim his rightful throne. From there, he joined forces with Cadogan, and together with the King of Powys became a leading figure in the Welsh insurrection. To help his Marcher lords subdue this rebellion, the King of England led two major expeditions into Wales in 1095 and 1097, but the Kings of Powys and Gwynedd wisely avoided direct battle with his royal army. Unable to feed and pay his men indefinitely, William was forced to depart both times, having accomplished little to nothing. Meanwhile, two other Norman armies were ambushed and annihilated by the Celtic Britons in two battles at Gelli Tafawg in Gwent and Aberllech in Brycheiniog. The tides began to turn in 1098, when the forces of Cadogan and Cynan failed to take Castle Pembroke. From this fortress, the Norman Marcher lords found a second wind when Earl Hugh of Chester and Earl Hugh of Shrewsbury joined their forces and pushed the Kings of Powys and Gwynedd all the way back up to the Isle of Anglesey. In this, the Normans were aided by an influential Welsh noble, Owain ap Edwin. The rebel kings hired a fleet of Irish Vikings to push back against the two Hughs. However, the Normans simply bribed these Vikings to switch sides, and in doing so, forced Cynan to go into exile again after losing Gwynedd for the third time. However, in one of medieval history's more notable Deus Ex Machinas, Magnus Baraleg, King of Norway, happened to be sailing through the Irish Sea with his fleet at the time. For whatever reason, he clashed with the Normans off Anglesey, defeating them in a battle where Hugh of Shrewsbury was slain. Due to this, the Kings of Powys and Gwynedd were able to return from exile and drive the Normans out of northern Wales. By 1099, it was clear, as things stood, that neither side had quite the combination of resources and strategy to completely subdue the other, so both Cynan and Cadogan sat down for peace talks with representatives of King William II, son of William the Conqueror. In the following proceedings, the Crown of England and the Marcher Lords recognise Gruffydd ap Cynan as the rightful King of Gwynedd, and confirmed Cadogan ap Blethyn as the legitimate ruler of Powys and Ceredigion. However, much of southern Wales would remain under the rule of Norman lordships. For the next 200 years, while southern Wales remained under Norman domination, northern Wales would remain a centre of Briton independence, and the border between these two spheres would become known as the Welsh Marches. Now let us take a break from the march of history and look at a broader picture of what politics, warfare and culture looks like in Wales during this time. Contrary to the picture we have thus far painted, life in the Welsh kingdoms during the High Middle Ages was not just a raw struggle for survival. Despite the perpetual threat of the Normans, the Briton kingdoms were experiencing a literary renaissance. In the timeline of Welsh poetry, the years between 1100 and 1300 AD are known as Baeth y Tywysogion, the poets of the princes. During this time, bards commanded a position of extreme respect in Welsh society, and Briton kings would have a Bath Teulu, a house poet. Occupying a prestigious seat on the king's royal court, it was the Bath Teulu's duty to sing to the king's troops before they headed off into battle, as well as to sing privately for the queen. Perhaps the most famous Bath Teulu was Maelor Brydydd, court poet of none other than King Gruffydd ap Cynan of Gwynedd. Welsh kings in this era were also known to sponsor bardic schools, where ancient lyrical traditions were made accessible to more people than ever before. These schools were run by pencyrth, chief musicians, who sat in an honoured position next to the king's heir in the royal court. The incredibly dense corpus of Welsh language literature and poetry from the 11th to 13th century, which survives to this day, proves that despite the constant threat to their independence, the kingdoms of the Celtic Britons were among the most educated and culturally sophisticated peoples of the High Middle Ages. Nevertheless, the shadow of the English crown still loomed over them, and as such, they were also highly militarized societies, whose foreign policy revolved around a volatile relationship with the foreign commandants who occupied the southern half of their people's homeland. Over 2 centuries, the number of Norman lordships in Wales, the noble families which ruled over them, and the total amount of Welsh territory they controlled would all fluctuate. However, they all shared the same characteristics. For one thing, the Norman lords in southern Wales were practically independent rulers. Although they owed nominal fealty to the Crown of England, they were granted many privileges that their counterparts in England did not have, such as exemption from royal taxation and the right to pass their own laws. Most importantly, Norman marcher lords had the right to build their own castles, a jealously guarded privilege which the English crown was incredibly hesitant to afford to its vassals in England. The reason for this was that castles were the Normans' favoured method of establishing dominance in the lands they conquered. In England itself, the English king saw little need to allow his vassals to build too many castles, for it would empower them and risk rebellion. Moreover, since the Anglo-Saxon peoples had already been thoroughly tamed, there was little need for them. However, on the Welsh frontier, where the local Celtic Britons were still wild and defiant, the English crown allowed their frontier lords to have a freer hand. To this day, modern Wales still has the highest concentration of castles of anywhere in Europe, a testament to how many fortifications the Normans had to erect to fully subdue the native Britons. It should also be noted that in the parts of Wales ruled by Norman lords, the linguistic and ethnic makeup was still composed of a predominantly rural Welsh-speaking peasantry. Granted, King Henry I did encourage the migration of Breton, Flemish and English settlers into southern Wales, who tended to cluster around Norman castles. To this day, many of Wales's largest cities, such as Cardiff and Swansea, were originally settlements built up around the site of a Norman marcher lord's fortress. The relationship between the Norman lordships and the native kingdoms in Wales was at best capricious. Often there were long periods of peace and stability, usually secured with political marriages between Norman nobles and Welsh royalty. As a result, many prominent Norman marcher families, like the Mortimers, de Lasseys and Talbots, acquired a heavy quantity of Briton blood, and after a few generations, the conflict the kings of Wales fought against the Norman occupiers was less a struggle against an alien entity, but more so a dynastic struggle against their own extended families. For indeed, despite frequent alliances forged from politically advantageous marriages, war was still a fact of life on the Welsh frontier. In this, the Normans were among the deadliest foes the Britons ever faced. Possessed of arguably the best shock cavalry in the world, the Normans in the 11th century had smashed the armies of Saxon kings, Italian lords, Arab emirs, and even the mighty Eastern Roman Emperor. Thus, it is all the more impressive that the Welsh, a small, rural people on the very fringe of Europe, were able to resist the Norman juggernaut for over 200 years. In the early years of the march, the Welsh were unable to go toe-to-toe with the better-equipped Normans in the open field. To compensate for this, the Britons tended to avoid open battle with the conquerors. Instead, they hid in the rugged hills, using evasion to lure Norman armies deep into their territory before harassing them with guerrilla tactics and annihilating them via ambush. Norman castles proved another significant challenge, but Welsh warriors were deadly lightning raiders who could plunder and pillage the hinterlands around such fortifications with remarkable efficiency and retreat back into the hills before the Norman force within could be mustered to confront them. After all, what use was having a castle to sit in if you were helpless to defend the lands around it? After a few decades of on-and-off fighting, some Welsh kings began to adopt Norman-style warfare, managing to field Norman-style cavalry and build Norman-style castles in their domains. This cultural transaction went both ways, as the Welsh were highly renowned archers, and it is often argued that the Welsh bow inspired the creation of the English longbow, which in later centuries would decide the fate of some of medieval Europe's most famous battles, like Agincourt and Crecy. In the year 1136, while campaigning in Normandy, King Henry I died without any male heirs. As a succession crisis threatened to grip the Kingdom of England, the Marcher Lords turned the majority of their troops eastwards. With the Norman presence in Wales suddenly reduced, fierce rebellions quickly erupted across nearly all of the southern occupied territories. By now, King Gruffydd ap Cynan, nearly 80 years old, was well past his prime. However, his sons, Owain and Cadwaladr, had since matured into fearsome and capable warriors. Riding south, the two princes of Gwynedd linked up with King Gruffydd ap Rhys of Deheubarth. At a place called Crwg Mawr, near the castle of Cardigan, the Welsh army, now some 6,000 strong, met an equally large force of Flemish and Norman soldiers led by Robert Fitzmartin, Lord of Somay. In the following battle, the Britons utterly annihilated the occupiers, reportedly slaying over 3,000 men, an astronomical kill count for the era. Following this stunning victory, the region of Ceredigion, occupied at some point in the early 12th century, was liberated from Norman rule and annexed into the territory of Gwynedd. Ultimately, great Welsh victories like that at Crwg Mawr, in hindsight, represented a delaying of the inevitable, as the interminable advance of the Anglo-Normans would ultimately continue until all of Wales was under English rule. Despite this, it would take another 150 years to fully accomplish this, and for every inch of Welsh land taken, the Celtic Britons would make the invaders pay with a quart of blood. In our next episode on the history of medieval Wales, we will cover the final generations of independent Briton kings, as great warriors like Owain Gwynedd, Llywelyn the Great, and Llywelyn the Last will ensure that the flame of Welsh independence burns hot and bright before being snuffed out for good. If you don't want to miss that episode, or any other video we release, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.